Okay, good afternoon, everybody here at council and in our chambers. So we're meeting at 4 p.m. August 1st for a special meeting of council at 4 p.m. So it's our call to order. We're going to adopt the agenda that the West Elgin Council hereby adopts the special meeting agenda of August 1st, 2024 as presented. If I can mover and seconder, please. Councillor Novakis and Councillor Denny, all in favor? That is so moved. Number 3 on our agenda is disclosure of any pecuniary interest. Anyone having anything that they need to declare? Looking around the room and not seeing any. Thank you for that, but you can declare later at the time. For presentation from Ontario Clean Water Agency regarding our boil water advisory event from the 24th of July until the 26th of July. Thank you for attending today, and I believe it's Sam Smith is going to speak on this. All right, you have the floor. Thanks.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Deputy Mayor Tellier, West Elgin Council, members of the community. For those of you listening that do not know me, I'm Sam Smith, the Senior Operations Manager with Ontario Clean Water Agency. Specifically, I am the Senior Operations Manager and overall responsible operator for the West Elgin distribution system and the Tri-County Water Treatment Plant. My wife and I, along with our three young children, also are residents of West Elgin and consume the drinking water daily. I first wanted to thank everyone for their patience and understanding last week during the boil water advisory. We understand that it can cause some anxiety and stress when there are potential issues related to your drinking water. My colleagues and I are here to explain the processes that took place and show you that this boil water advisory was a cautionary approach to ensure the health and safety of the residents of West Elgin. I'm 100% confident in the integrity of the drinking water in West Elgin. I was confident before the advisory. We will show you why we were confident during the advisory and why I remain confident. The boil water was issued out of an abundance of caution. First, primary and secondary disinfection at the Tri-County Water Treatment Plant has been maintained without exception. This is a reportable requirement at the water treatment plant. Secondly, which Megan will detail in her presentation, the chlorine residual at the sample point where the AWQI was observed was well above the required residual to inactivate or remove any bacteria. There were no maintenance activities on the system, no pressure losses, and no other adverses in the 18 other samples taken throughout the Tri-County network of systems, particularly upstream and downstream of the adverse sample. All indications at this time were that this sample was contaminated somewhere between the sample point and analysis at the lab. Aqua operators have gone through extensive training on sampling procedures. These are trained, licensed, and competent people. Megan will show you that we follow sampling SOPs and guidance from the MECP. The lab also has very strict protocols for handling these samples. But no amount of due diligence and strict adherence to the protocol will ever eliminate the fact that there is always a human element to taking and handling these samples. Environmental factors can also lead to a spoiled sample. These bottles are by design very sensitive. The smallest contamination will show up on the analysis. As Megan is about to show you, even though we can confidently say that this sample was contaminated after it left the water main, we still have strict protocol to follow while we investigate and confirm this to be the case. Even if there is a sliver of a chance that the water being directed to users has an issue, we must ensure the health and safety of the residents that are consuming it. Although we are confident in the integrity of the water during the boil water advisory, to ensure that people remain diligent and continue to boil their water, we must maintain the message to the residents that boiling the water is needed. Once additional sample results are received and our facts are backed up by the clear results, we can then be assured that we are correct. We want to reiterate that we are confident that the integrity of the water was and remains extremely high. We meet and exceed all regulations when it comes to the quality of drinking water in West Elgin. We are confident that this sample was contaminated after it left the water main, and that although strict adherence to the SOPs and guidelines was followed, the human element was a factor. This should not be viewed as a negative occurrence, but rather in a positive light that the processes in place work and the drinking water was shown to have no issues. Megan will now give you a detailed presentation on those facts and show you all the regulations that were met.
Thank you, Sam. Good evening, Council. I'm Megan Garber. Just for a little back history, I've been with Ontario Clean Water Agency for 14 years. My operating career actually started in the municipality of West Elgin. I'm now the Safety Process and Compliance Manager for the Southwest region. And I've put together this presentation today to give you a little bit of an overview of what we did, why we do what we do, and the corrective actions that we took as a result of the Boil Water Advisory. So just to start, I'd like to bring to your attention that the West Elgin Distribution System is a large municipal residential drinking water system, which is defined under Ontario Regulation 170.03, and means that the municipal drinking water system serves a major residential development and serves more than 100 private residents. This definition is important in Ontario Regulation 170 because it defines what we are supposed to do within the system based on the different schedules outlined in the regulation. The West Elgin Distribution System is operated in accordance with the Safe Drinking Act, and again, Regulation 170 dictates the policies and procedures that we have in place and why we do what we do in the system. To bring to your attention is just a map here. The West Elgin Sample Station number 10 and West Elgin Sample Station number 15 are the samples that were collected in the system on July 23rd. West Elgin Sample Station number 10 is where the adverse occurred. So regulated operational checks. So under Ontario Regulation 170, Schedule 7-2, the owner of a large municipal residential system that provides secondary disinfection and the operating authority for the system shall ensure that at least 7 distribution samples are taken each week and tested immediately for free chlorine residual. So this is required in the West Elgin Distribution System. We have to be out there and taking at least 7 samples in the system to ensure that there is a secondary disinfection residual maintained in the water system. Furthermore, to Schedule 7, we are required to take at least 4 samples on one day of the week, at least 48 hours after the last sample was taken in the previous week, and at least 3 samples must be taken on a second day of the week, at least 48 hours after the last sample was taken. So our process for West Elgin Distribution System is to obtain 4 samples and test for free chlorine residual on Mondays, and we do the same routine again on Friday, testing those same locations and looking for the free chlorine residual in the system. So what is a free chlorine residual? Chlorine residual is the amount of chlorine determined by testing remaining after the demand is satisfied. The presence of a free chlorine residual of at least 0.2 to 0.4 parts per million usually provides a high degree of assurance that the disinfection of water is complete. So these are important numbers. They're specified in the procedure for disinfection of drinking water in Ontario as well, and they recommend that we maintain 0.2 parts per million at the extremities of the distribution system at all times. Again, the procedure for disinfection of drinking water, where the provisions of secondary disinfection is required by the regulation, the drinking water system's distribution system must be operated such that all times, again, all locations have at least a free chlorine residual of 0.05. So I did just say 0.2. That's our best practice recommendation, and that's within this document as well. However, our regulated number is 0.05 milligrams per liter or parts per million in the water. And at the bottom there, you'll see the recommended optimum target, again, is 0.2. We're regulated to meet 0.05. So why is a free chlorine residual important? So the maintenance of a disinfectant residual in the distribution system, what we refer to as secondary disinfection, is intended to maintain or introduce and maintain a persistent disinfectant residual to protect the water from microbiological recontamination, reduce bacterial regrowth, control biofilm formation, and serve as an indicator of distribution system integrity, which could mean the loss of disinfectant residual, indicating that at some point the system has been compromised. This is an important slide as we get to the details of July 23rd. So again, a chlorine residual may also reduce the risk of widespread microbiological contamination in the event of an intrusion in the distribution system. So maintaining that residual allows that there's still some free chlorine left in there to react with something should it enter the water system. However, this protective effect depends heavily on the magnitude of the event and the susceptibility of the contaminating microorganism to chlorine. Vegetative bacterial pathogens such as E. coli are readily inactivated by chlorine residuals. And here's the important part on this slide is that the residual at the time of the AWQI was actually 1.01 milligrams per liter or parts per million, which is roughly 5 times the recommended chlorine residual based on the procedure for disinfection and drinking water in Ontario. So our regulated microbiological sampling, again, this is detailed under Ontario Regulation 170 under Schedule 10, which specifies that the owner of a drinking water system and the operating authority shall ensure that if the system serves 100,000 people or less, at least 8 distribution samples plus 1 additional distribution sample for every 1,000 people served by the system are taken every month, with at least 1 of the samples being taken each week. So we collect 4 distribution samples per week in the West Elgin distribution system from various points in the system. These are also verified on an annual basis by the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks. We are to submit our sampling plans, all of our results, and those are inspected on an annual basis. So further to Schedule 10, it outlines what we are required to test for. So as we are aware, we are to test for E. coli, total coliform, and 25% of our samples must be tested for heterotrophic plate counts, which is an indicator bacteria. So if those numbers were elevated at a specific sample station, it would be cause for us to initiate an investigation to find out what may be causing it. It is not a reportable number. So just to outline the West Elgin distribution system and the process flow. So as Sam had mentioned, the system is fed by the Tri-County Water Treatment Plant. So on July 23rd, the Tri-County Water System actually collected 4 of its own samples. So that's on the transmission main, delivering the water from the West Tri-County Water Treatment Plant to both the Rodney Tower as well as the West Lawrence standpipe. Those samples were all satisfactory. The West Elgin distribution system is then further, there's 4 samples collected within that system as well, 3 of which on the 23rd were all satisfactory, with the one that we know was adverse. Dutton Dunwich distribution system also receives their water from the Tri-County Drinking Water System and collected 4 samples out of their system on the 23rd. All of those samples came back satisfactory. And lastly, we also supply water to Southwest Middlesex. It comes from the water treatment plant all the way down through West Lauren to the reservoir and then out to the residents of Southwest Middlesex, where the operators there collected 6 additional samples and none of those returned adverse incidents. So again, under the requirements for sampling in the West Elgin distribution systems, residuals are confirmed throughout the system, as I had mentioned, on Mondays and Fridays. Samples are collected in the system on Mondays, except for holidays, we move them to Tuesday. And between 16 to 20 samples are collected each month in the West Elgin distribution system. Samples are submitted to a third-party accredited laboratory. Sample numbers, locations, as I had mentioned, and results are reviewed on an annual basis by the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. And laboratory testing for E. coli and total coliform bacteria does take 24 hours. So the results are not immediately available. And once our samples are submitted to the lab, we have to wait until those samples are completed to receive those results. So to review the sample collection, so our standard operating procedure follows the guidelines from the ministry that's set out in the protocols for collecting and handling samples in Ontario. So to begin, the operator will gather the required sample bottles and paperwork before beginning sampling. The operator will arrive at the required sample locations. That's based on a sampling schedule and what's identified on our chain of custodies that, again, we have come up with based on the schematics of the system on where we feel we should be sampling. And we also, in consultation with the ministry, confirm those locations. The operator disinfects and opens the sample port and begins to flush the station. You'll see there the picture on the right-hand side. That's typically what you're going to see with a sample station. So that's actually an appurtenance that's attached to the water main that actually feeds that station to get a representative water sample out of the water main. However, when the valve is closed, you will have a section of water that's sitting in there in that sample station. So it's good to flush it out because that would just be sitting from the last time somebody had closed the valve. The operator then collects and documents the chlorine residual. We are regulated by Schedule 6 in Ontario 170 to collect a chlorine residual every time we take a sample. It's considered a non-compliance if we do not have a chlorine residual associated with the sampling time in a sample that was collected at a certain location. The operator then collects the sample in the designated sample container. Samples are stored in a cooler with ice packs as required before returning to the facility to further package the samples for pickup by the laboratory. The laboratory confirms receipt of samples and verifies sample temperature. All of our samples are associated with a chain of custody. They all have to be listed, dated, location, times, operator that collected them, and the operator also has to sign off that they were the ones that submitted the samples. The document up there on the right that you'll see is the practice for collection and handling of drinking water samples that makes up our standard operating procedure and that is working in conjunction with those procedures to help the operators understand the importance of following the SOP. Sample bottles are provided from the laboratory. As Sam mentioned, they are very sensitive. The diagram there below is an actual photograph of the sample bottles that we use. We order these through the laboratory directly and get sent them as needed. Aseptic techniques must be followed when handling the sterile sample bottles used for microbiological sampling collection, as Sam had mentioned. We do have strict protocols to ensure that the bottles are not damaged at the time of receipt, and we have to make sure that the bottles are not compromised. These are maintained in a secure location, and operators review each bottle before collecting the sample. Because again, failure to do so could result in a compromise of the results. So further into our duty to report. So we've now gone through the sample collection, what we do in the system, and now our duties as the operating authority and as well as the owner on reporting adverse water quality incidents. So our duty to report is actually under Section 18 of the Safe Drinking Water Act and is further outlined in Ontario Regulation 170, Schedule 16. So the following are prescribed as adverse results of a drinking water test for the purpose of Section 18, which are listed in Schedules 1, 2, and 3, and that's under Ontario Regulation 169, where it details that we are to have 0 E. coli and 0 total coliform in our water samples. And so this is where we have contravened that with the result that we received on the 23rd. So the duty to report under Section 18 of the Safe Drinking Water Act is our duty to report any adverse test results, and each of the following persons shall report every prescribed adverse result of a drinking water test conducted on any waters from a municipal drinking water system or a regulated non-municipal drinking water system to the Ministry and the Medical Officer of Health immediately after the adverse result is obtained. First is the operating authority responsible for the system. If there is no responsible or operating authority for the system, it would be the owner and the person operating the laboratory at which the adverse test was obtained. So that's how the process goes. We receive a call from the laboratory once they receive results that they are adverse. From there, it's our duty as the operating authority to inform the owner. We then have to call the health unit, and we also have to report to the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks Spills Action Center. Our duty to report, again, to the owner is if an operating authority is required to report an adverse test result under subsection 1, we shall immediately report the adverse to the owner of the system for which we are responsible. Just a timeline of events like I had kind of outlined there. So on the 24th, again, the first notice to us is from the laboratory that the sample has come back with an adverse. From there, we notify the operating authority is to report immediately to the health unit. We are also required to report immediately to the Spills Action Center. The operating authority discussed with the health unit, and the health unit is the one that ultimately issues the boil water advisory. Our owner notification, we have a duty to notify the owner, and the operating authority notified the owner following up that there was a boil water advisory issued. The boil water advisory notification, fire department and Aqua hand delivering the notices. So just a communication timeline there. So then further into our corrective actions on July 24th. So if you have a report of E. coli which is required to be made under Section 18, the owner of the drinking water system and the operating authority shall ensure that the following corrective actions are taken. Immediately resample and test, immediately increase the chlorine. This obviously wasn't required at this site because we had more than ample chlorine at the time. And when the operator took the second set of samples, we also found that our chlorine was more than adequate in the system. Maintaining the free chlorine residual, and again, taking 2 consecutive sets of samples 24 to 48 hours apart or as otherwise directed by the Medical Officer of Health. And again, take any other steps as directed, which in this case was to issue a boil water for the system. So to further discuss the boil water advisory is issued by the health unit. We have no real control over it. We try to explain. A lot of times they don't understand the system. They don't understand much about water treatment in general anyway. So Sam, in this instance, discussed at length with the health unit on the logistics of, the other samples that were collected in this system, the location. It was, in partnership with us and deciding kind of where and how this was determined. But ultimately, it comes down to the health unit who is making the call that a boil water advisory will be issued. They do rely on us quite heavily, though, for understanding the system and understanding what actually went on. And the boil water advisory also gets rescinded by the health unit. So they decide when the water is now safe to drink and when the boil water advisory is lifted. And just to reiterate, as Sam had mentioned, that these drinking water advisories are public health protection messages about real or potential health risks related to drinking water. These advisories are generally precautionary, which I think we've come to agree on, meaning they're typically issued before drinking water quality problems occur. Again, just to follow up, so what we know about the situation is we know that our chlorine residuals were found to be adequate. We know that there was no equipment failures at the time that this adverse was obtained. There was no maintenance issues reported in the system or the systems that service the system. There were no water pipe or distribution issues. We had no pressure loss. There was no other adverse results upstream or downstream. We have no mechanical issues. There were no outbreaks of human illness reported to the health unit. Historical records show there was no issues in the system or any areas to be concerned of, and there's no other concerns with the distribution system or other serviced by the same treatment plant. So what happened? Based on all the data gathered from the day of the event, the sample became contaminated, as Sam had mentioned, when it left the sample port and entered the bottle and on its way to the laboratory. The operator has received hands-on training in April of 2024 on bacteriological sample collection and analysis. It was a how-to program. It was hands-on on how to collect samples, and he had received that training in April. All staff have received a 6-part training series on sampling and will receive further training on the ministry's practice for collection and handling of drinking water samples. An Aqua standard operating procedure was followed during the sample collection. And just to reiterate, Aqua, we follow our operational plan that's developed for the system. We are required to do that. We are an accredited operating authority, so we have an operational plan in place. And I just thought it was a good idea to reiterate Aqua's policy that supports our QEMS, which is to deliver safe water and wastewater services that protect public health, the environment, and the sustainability of communities, to comply with applicable legislation and regulations, to promote client, consumer, and stakeholder confidence through service excellence, effective communications and reporting, to train our staff on their QEMS responsibilities, and to maintain and continually improve the QEMS. And I'll leave our visions and mission statement there. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Megan. Thank you, Sam. Is there any other gentleman with you? You have anything you'd like to add, or?
I'd like to say hi, first of all. I am new to
You
the
can use your
area.
microphone
Yep,
and just introduce
sorry.
yourself.
I am new to the system here, but nonetheless, the expertise of Mr. Smith and Mrs. Garber here has proven to be very valuable in this event and our response to it. I completely concur with the outcome of the situation, our analysis, and what we found. So I have no further statements on this.
All right, thank you three for the time. I'll take any questions to council or staff. Councilor Statham, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, through the chair. Really appreciate the presentation. That was fantastic. You have to forgive me, I'm not an expert on water sampling. I was wondering, for those people that are listening, and for myself and any other members of council, could you walk me through, please, the exact process when a technician arrives on site to sample? Could you explain the process on how that sample is conducted? So they exit their vehicle and then...
Sure. Through the chair? Yeah, absolutely. So back to the slide, the photo is there of what the sample station looks like. That's typically what we'll use and where we're collecting the sample. So you're correct. The operator would arrive on site to the sample station. They would use hand sanitizer to make sure their hands are sanitized before leaving the vehicle. They'll then take that sanitizer with them, open the sample station, turn it on, and make sure everything's flowing all right first. They'll leave the sample station like that while they return back to their vehicle. They're going to then get their chlorine kit out and ready. So that means they have a little pocket colorimeter, they've got a little vial, and they need to collect that chlorine residual. After usually about 5 minutes of flushing, again, we're trying to remove that section of water that's been sitting between the main stop and the top, so letting that flow. They then collect their chlorine residual. It's going to be in a little vial. They've got a little packet that they have to put in that's going to register the chlorine. They'll get that reading. They're going to document that on their chain of custody. They're then also going to record the time, because it's now time for sample collection, ensuring that that chlorine residual is adequate. They'll then sanitize their hands again, grab their sample bottle, to undo the cap. The cap is also a source of contamination. They have to be very careful with what they do with that. It sometimes can be tricky juggling things, but it should remain in their hand face down. The sample bottle will then go to the sample port. There's a simple fill line right on the microbiological samples that they're to fill to. Cap goes right on. That sample goes into a cooler, and they'll proceed to their next sample location after shutting the sample station down.
Okay. So just to follow up again through the chair, how would that have become contaminated then? Like, I'm just trying to work through it in my head. How would a bacterial contamination arrive into if we're following all of those standard operating procedures?
Yeah.
How would a bacterial contamination arrive into the sampling container?
Did the operator hold the cap down? Was
Right.
it up? It's like Sam said, these are extremely sensitive.
Right.
And so a gust of wind and, you know, it could be a number of things. These are designed to pick up the smallest amount of microbiological contamination. We can't really pinpoint, right? Because that operator also collected the rest of the 3 samples that were collected in the distribution system
With no adverse results.
with no adverse results.
Right. I guess the reason I'm asking these questions, I just was trying to establish whether there was an error, an identifiable error. This had a certain amount of cost to the municipality.
Yep.
So I was just wondering if there was an identifiable error that took place at the time of sampling. And if that was something that you guys had identified or not, but.
I may through the chair. I also want to bring up the point that we're not saying that this sample was contaminated by the operator. There's 4 or 5 or 6 other people that handle this sample after Aqua's done with it.
Sure.
There's a strict lab analysis that they go through, and they go through stringent SOPs too. And there's a very good chance, as good a chance that this happened at the lab as it did happen at the sample point.
Yeah.
I just want to bring that up too. And like Megan said, that there's so many different factors that could have affected this one sample that it is not identifiable. That is a good way to put it, that it is unidentifiable how this sample was contaminated, but we're confident that it was contaminated after it left the sample station.
Thank you. That's the important part to me. One last question. How many times have there been adverse samples in West Elgin? Has this happened in the past? I've only been on council for a year, so I'm not really sure.
So there's different types of adverses, obviously, that get reported. The level of caution that the health unit employs on depending on what the nature of the AWQI is. The last one that was reported for the West Elgin distribution system was in 2019.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And just to add again, sorry, not to go through the chair, that sample was also reported to the municipality. Not saying that it didn't get out any farther, but it was not a boil water. There's like Megan said in her presentation, the water was put on because of the E. coli, not the total coliform. So there is a difference, but this isn't the first time. But it's 2019 is when the last one was.
Thank you for the clarification. Anyone else from council have any questions? Councilor Denning, you have the floor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, through the chair. Thank you to Aqua for being here with us this afternoon to provide this presentation to us. 2 questions. First of all, Station 10. Megan, where is that?
That's located on Queen Street,
Queen Street at
4th.
4th. Okay, Queen and 4th. All right, and number 2, so this presentation this afternoon has been great. It's been really helpful, kind of to summarize everything. I understand that Aqua has a sort of a communique that's forthcoming that we will be able to share with the community, essentially with the highlights of the presentation that you have provided to us this afternoon. My question is that how long has this case been put together? Because some of the problems that we've experienced over the last few days has come from lack of communication through us with our community. I'm thinking to myself that this wonderful presentation that you've given us today, if we had had this in our hands 2, maybe 3 days before, with your stamp on it, because you're the professionals, to distribute that to our community, it might have minimized some of the frustrations that we've all absorbed.
Through the chair, if I could. This presentation was prepared on Tuesday, so it could have been distributed. It was provided. That's all I can really say towards that.
Yeah, and through the chair, I could speak to some communication. Aqua, we've communicated with senior staff of the municipality throughout this boil water. What has been communicated to council and to residents is not up to Aqua. We have provided multiple communications, and understandably, the it's not just the. I don't want to blame the municipality for what gets communicated and what's not. It's also slightly controlled by the health unit. But anything that is in this, in my statement and Megan's presentation, has been shared throughout the boil water. I have most of the communications here. Essentially, the regulatory parts and the corrective actions were shared with the municipality on Thursday at around 9:45. And every time that we received notice that a sample was received and when corrective actions were complete, that was communicated. So again, it's not Aqua's, our requirement is to report things to the municipality, and what gets reported out to the residents is up to the municipality after that.
Thank you through the chair, and thank you for that, Sam and Megan. So I guess, and I understand that. Just to kind of go at this from a little bit of a different perspective. I feel as though it's Aqua that has the expertise, the goodwill. We as a municipality, you know, where we continue to learn and then share the information. Going forward, what I'm suggesting is that perhaps in a future event such as this, that we could consider handling the communication in a more in a better partnership with both brands being pushed out. And I'm not suggesting that that's just the responsibility of one agency and not the other, but saying that if we were to do this in more of a strategic partnership, West Elgin has our team here of Aqua who has something that they would like to say. That I think, in my opinion, and from the perspective of the community, that adds some comfort knowing that because we're counselors, we all have other jobs, and we do the best we can, but you're the ones that we look to for that guidance, which we know you have, as evidenced by the incredibly concise presentation that you've made here this afternoon. So what I'm saying is, in the event that this was to happen again, I would like both of our organizations to consider working at a more effectively co-branded form of communication.
Yeah, through the chair. Yeah, I completely agree. There's a lot of information that people will want that is disadvantageous to share. Again, we can provide a joint, and there was joint communications. Pretty much every communication that went out from the health unit from the municipality, Aqua never releases any sort of communications directly ourselves, but that was all behind the scenes. That was all collaborative. We did provide some wording that we felt that was pertinent to should be shared. And you know, it was chosen not to be shared. But again, you're right. It should be a joint message, and we completely agree with that.
Thanks.
Through the chair, if I may.
Go ahead, Megan, you have the floor.
I had mentioned this earlier, but I think a lot of this comes down to too with, you know, a misunderstanding in most of the communities that we work in, and not just West Elgin, about, you know, where their water comes from, what it goes through, and what we actually do as an operating authority and as Aqua as a whole. I'm big on community outreach. I'm part of our One Water program delivering in schools. And if there's any benefit, or you feel that there would be any benefit in a sort of a public information session on, you know, what Aqua does in the community, what the water treatment plant there does, where we service, and kind of what our staff do, you know, that would be something that we would be more than happy to put together too, because I think a lot of times, you know, people don't fully understand where their water comes from and the tests that they go through. And, you know, we can proudly say in the province of Ontario, we have some of the most strict laws around water and the distribution thereof. And we take a lot of pride in the job that we do, and we're happy to spread that around and, you know, let the community know what's going on and why we sit back and have the confidence that we do, that, you know, there's no issue with the water in the West Elgin distribution system. So just putting that out there, that is something that we offer as an agency, and I'd be more than happy to do for the community.
Thank you for that. Just thinking, once we get through this and everything else is done, I think I've said in the past, maybe just before we had the pandemic, that an open house, I don't know if you're insurance wise, you're able to do that at all, or reaching out to the schools or anything. I know grade 4, they do a big unit on water, where it comes from, how it works, and maybe we could reach out to the schools and do something in some goodwill and get them young, understanding exactly what you do. But I agree with Counselor Denning in the fact that this is your vocation, this is your, you know, this is your careers, and it'd be great if we could all work together with the experts, if this is what exactly we're doing with our staff, in future, a little more tandem. Anything else from counselor staff at all? Not hearing anything. So we'll go ahead with the recommendation then, please.
That West Elgin Council hereby accept the presentation from Megan Garber, Safety Process and Compliance Manager, Ontario Clean Water Agency, Southwest Region, for information and discussion purposes.
Can I have a mover, please? Counselor Navakis and seconder, Counselor Statham, all in favor? That is so moved. Thank you for that, and we'll have a bit of a break before we carry on to our other business here. Thanks. All right, bringing council back in session, move on to number 5 of the agenda, Economic Development Committee. 5.1, current terms of reference. Everyone's looked those over on their agenda. Okay, any questions on those terms of reference? No, okay. 5.2, committee member delegations. There's a few people here, and 5.2.1 is Dan Sue. So if you could approach the podium and state your name once again. Oh,
Talk about this topic other than just sit here.
okay. What's council's wishes to talk about the economic development in our community? That's what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be brainstorming, because under the municipal act, we can't just talk among ourselves about ideas and things we have, because that's considered a meeting. So we have to have a meeting as such this and follow everything, and then invite others to speak about it. So what I brought this up for and wanted to have, I think in the early spring, maybe late winter, was to look at our empty storefronts, look what we could bring into the community, look what we could do, and maybe work together with our other committees, so the rec committee as well, to bring things together and work in tandem with each other, or maybe have different ideas for each other. So that was the thought behind having a special meeting in regards to the economic development and the rec committee to come forward at this time. So, and this is what best worked, as we only have one meetings each month in the summer. So just looking at our 2 villages and every little hamlet in between, I don't want to forget about them. What we could bring to this area, what could we do differently? I know we have a festival coming up, we have our car shows, we have other things that bring in a little bit of economic drive to the community. I know our businesses and such have a lot of different special days and special I don't know, events, I guess, that we always have going on. But what could we do as a council, of any brainstorming about filling or approaching those people that maybe have an empty storefront, or yeah, anything like that, maybe bringing citizens into it. What, does anybody have any ideas about how that looks or what we could do with that? Councilor Bacchus?
And I think these are all really good points, and I kind of want to circle back to the meeting, the reason of the meeting. So it is felt in some of our economic development committee meetings that we are kind of pulling ideas sometimes on what we think we should be talking about. And so we've had some great discussion about the fact that we want a map, right, for all of our businesses. And so then it's also chicken egg thing that in order for us to develop a map with all of our businesses on it, I personally feel we probably need to look at branding, right? We've talked about the fact that there is no place for people to stay when they come to our community. So when we talk about tourism, we're really talking about day tripping. So we came up with an idea to maybe talk to Robert about having people stay at trailer parks, right? Could we convince them to put up lodging? We've talked about the festival. We've created a list of empty storefronts in our community. But what's kind of happening is these are all kind of piecemeal ideas and thoughts that we are coming up with. And it is hard to keep a committee going and progressing and growing if we are kind of coming up with thoughts here or there. There is no clear direction for the Economic Development Committee. And so to Tressa's point, it was also asking our fellow council members and the committee members, kind of what is the focus of an economic development committee in a small town where we don't have a ton of resources? What is the role of an economic development committee in a small town working with limited staff, right? What is it that we're hoping to achieve? And for people such as Ryan and Teresa who aren't currently on this committee, it's what do they want us to be focused on for the next 2 years, and what does an economic development committee look like? I did talk to Robert, our planner, and he is incredibly invested in economic development. So there is something to be said about whether that is an avenue we could be going down. But it really is, for me, we have a great group of people on the Economic Development Committee, but we have a group of people who are also incredibly busy. So to have a meeting once a month, I would like some guidance from council and staff. What is it that we want to be doing? If we go through our TOR, we're supposed to be developing strategic economic development plan. I think that's something that will have to be put in the budget, right? Because those cost money. We're supposed to be assisting in matters related to economic development. I don't really know what matters of economic development have come up in our first 2 years. Ideas and action plans and initiatives. There are so many things, and we've talked about it, that in our community, we could be doing 8 million action plans, but what is it that we would actually like the focus to be? Right? So if it's council's will and the committee's will that we're focusing solely on our 2 main streets, that's a really easy thing to be looking at. Right? But then we will hear it from the community that we're not focusing on the smaller businesses outside of those 2 main streets. Right? And then economic development often does come down to planning, and it's hard to kind of sometimes wrap your head around it, but even putting stop signs and traffic slowing through our main streets is economic development. And we've been talking about our street light, right? So if we're encouraging shopping on Main Street, is that something we want to be focusing on? And is this where Robert comes in? We've had conversations with developers who are building homes, and there is no sidewalks to get the people from those communities to our main streets. Is that something that as an economic development committee we should be working on? I think it's just, as someone who's never been on a rural economic development committee in London, it was very clear what was happening because the planner and the head of economic development sat on these committees and they drove the direction. We do not have that luxury. We do not have the money, and we do not have the staff. And so that is kind of where I was. I was feeling like we were floundering. It was make work for me a lot of the time, and I don't want to spend my time doing that. I'd like it to be productive.
Thank you for all that insight and discussion about that. Anything else from the rest of council? Go ahead, Ryan.
Thank you very much. And through the chair, I think when I'm looking at an economic development committee, I think some of the primary goals that I would identify as just in general would be looking at impediments to business in the community. So what are the impediments? You mentioned crosswalks. But what are some of the other impediments that are preventing businesses from prospering here? I would like to see some input from the EDC on how to retain small businesses, because I think what we see often is businesses will start up and they flourish for a certain period of time. They try to become established, and then we lose those businesses. So retention, I think, is a point that would be something that I would like the EDC to focus on. And lastly, and perhaps most important to me, would be how to provide information about the businesses and the services that they offer back to the general public. As a small business owner myself, I understand it's very difficult to get our name out there. And we've been trying to focus on that, trying to promote the business for several years, and it is very difficult. So those are 3, I think, fundamental points that I think that the Economic Development Committee could focus on. Again, those are just ideas. But that's sort of my thought on that. Thank you.
Counselor Navakis?
And then through that, to my other point, I said this, and I like committees, but what Counselor Statham has just kind of described is what a Chamber of Commerce or a BIA is supposed to do. And so ultimately, that was also the question that perhaps we could change our terms of reference and focus on the supporting of the small business, attracting new small business, but that is what a Chamber of Commerce or a BIA ultimately does. So when I was saying this, I do wonder if committees, the way we've set them up, have served their purpose, and perhaps then the Economic Development Committee for the next 2 years should be looking at how we are going to foster and facilitate the introduction of a Chamber of Commerce or a BIA, and then move out from the fact that staff time is being spent doing that. And I'm not saying that economic development is not important. I just filling Main Street spaces and promoting business and attracting business is not what is in an Economic Development Committee's mandate, really, or the one that we have on here right now. Right, so like if we go through what we're supposed to liaise with existing business and facilitate the development of enterprise through support provision, so there is some support for economic growth. It could be that we just want to change our terms of reference, but
Okay, thank you for that. How long has it been since West Elgin has had a BIA or a Chamber of Commerce? I want to say a decade, but maybe I'm wrong. So getting close to there. It wasn't too far off. So 2017, 2016. And at the time, does anyone remember how many people were on that or why it stopped? Want to speak to that, Councillor Denning?
Thank you through the chair. Thank you, Councillor Navakis. And it's an insightful observation to say that where economic development not necessarily ends, but where it hands the baton over is from a committee of council to a committee of business owners who certainly have equal but different motivation to get things done, and perhaps a little less restrictive as a BAA or a Chamber of Commerce. So our Chamber of Commerce for West Elgin, I was president for 2 years, and I think it was 2016 and 2017, it just wrapped up. It just had essentially run its course. It felt like there wasn't just enough membership or interest at that point. Different initiatives had been tried to revitalize it, including some folks in this room will remember the BIA and the fees associated with the proposed fees, and there was a little bit of a pushback on that. That didn't exactly create a whole lot of goodwill for the Chamber of Commerce. But there was some really great moments in the history of the West Elgin Chamber of Commerce, including our Business After 5 events. You might remember once a month, a business in West Elgin would essentially facilitate an open house where people in the community and fellow business owners and residents could come in and tour the business and maybe have some snacks, and maybe there'd be a speaker. So there was certainly some things that resonated well with West Elgin that could be revitalized that we know have worked in the past. My other observation is that one of our first economic development committee meetings, we started it off with a lot of really, really great ideas, and very quickly started to feel a tad overwhelmed by trying to accomplish all of these goals. And we talked about the idea of just taking baby steps and perhaps finding one thing that we could work on and try to be successful at before going to the next thing. And one of the ideas that was floated was something that impacts all businesses in West Elgin and residents is people. And with the clear awareness that we are a small community without a huge budget for economic development, being very aware of trying to work within our means, something that came up was the idea of doing some research with our staff and some awareness initiatives to let folks know what they can do with their properties now in their current zoning to encourage more residential growth, whether that's granny flats, basement apartments, coach houses. Did you know that if you are rural residential, you can do this, you can do that? Along with the idea of short-term identifying different places in West Elgin that currently offer short-term rental. And just putting that all out there to try to extend people's stays from one evening to perhaps a whole weekend, maybe a week, or maybe a lifetime in West Elgin. Not saying that needs to be the thing that we do, but regardless of whether we remain as an economic development committee or transition into a Chamber of Commerce, I think starting with one simple idea would be the thing to really stimulate interest in the community, and then we can go from there so that we don't get too overwhelmed. Because I think that we're sitting right now, this is the problem. We've had a hard time trying to figure out which direction to go when it comes to economic development, because there's so many different important aspects of growing the community. Where do we start?
Councillor Vakis?
And I think the other problem we have is that economic development in the kind of tiers is ultimately at the county level, right? When asking, and I think that's also where it is. So I know Dutton has worked very hard and they have created an economic development plan. I know that there was some financial assistance from Elgin County. I do think for me that is something that is important, and through that economic development plan, it is putting those things in. And I want to say, I do not want to get rid of the committee. I'm just saying that a lot of times when this is also where the conflict is, that some of the things that we really want to be focusing on aren't necessarily what is in our mandate to be focusing on. Right. And it's, as an economic development committee, we want to encourage people to move into our empty storefronts, but I don't know necessarily if it's the role of the economic development committee to be trying to rent out people's spaces, right? Like there's also conflict of interest with landlords. I agree. I think that it's just kind of focusing on that. And I think it is filling business spaces. How do we do that? But ultimately, to fill a business space and get more in there comes down to space making and looking at our main streets, and then looking at bigger things like tourism, right? Because we don't have enough feet on the street. And I agree, encouraging people to build more apartments so we can get more people here, but these are long-term goals. And I think that's where it always starts to kind of unravel for me, that there are like big level things that we need to probably focus on in the community about attracting business, attracting enough shoppers, and creating space that people want to spend time on, which is where I think Robert could be helpful, right? Like, how do you design and create main streets that make people want to walk them? But like, once again, I go back to, I don't know if that's our role as an economic development committee. And then how do we do this? And there isn't a lot of money. So it's, and then for staff, what kind of commitment or things are we taking back to them, right? In the new year, I don't know.
No, thank you for that. Thank you, Councillor Denning. Councillor Statham?
Thank you, through the chair. I think if I'm hearing this correctly, I think one of the things that we're lacking here from an economic development committee standpoint is clear direction on where to proceed. Okay, so one of the thoughts that I have when I consider this is, have we looked at other similarly sized municipalities and looked at what their economic development committees? Because I did a little bit of research before coming to this meeting today. One of the fundamental things that I see every time, almost every economic development committee in small municipalities, is downtown revitalization, facilitating entrepreneurship, enhancing tourism. These are some of the fundamental components of what an economic development committee in similar sized towns and townships are looking at doing. So my question to the EDC and back to council for consideration would be, have we looked at what other economic development committees are doing? If we're looking for direction, maybe that might spur some ideas. Maybe that might push us in the right direction. If we look at what other committees are doing, maybe we can use that as a sort of a blueprint on where we're headed. Again, that's just a thought, but those are some of the key ideas that I kept seeing coming up when I was reading about this. So, and to your point, fixing the downtowns. getting the downtowns back up and running. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Navakis.
Through the chair and to Councillor Statham's point, I think that Dutton Dunwich is an excellent example of rural economic development committee. And I think this is maybe also where we kind of floundered, that the committee got started late and so we didn't get budget time. But I do think talking to Henry Dreyfus, their first success or how they were able to get moving is that council immediately gave them $20,000 for their rebranding and their economic development plan. So and then they worked with experts who drove the plan, wrote this TOR for them, came up with the branding, and then focused on their downtown. And so I think much like the rec committee, it's that because we started a little bit late, we couldn't even get it in to our treasurer and CAO to ask for funding to start. And I think that maybe that is also where the problem was. It's that the first step, because of budget time and not putting it in, we couldn't really start. So like, it's unfortunate that the committee can't talk, but I would say that my first suggestion would be planning the economic development plan for this community should be one of our first priorities, and that we're early enough that we can ask for it in the budget. And then this committee can continue to meet if revitalization of our main streets and supporting small business is our key focus. Make that our focus until we get the economic development plan started for next year, and then it can guide us through that way. And like I said, I know Elgin County had said that they were more than willing to pay for part because they've done Southwold and Dutton Dunwiches. So it would be asking staff, I think, to reach out to Elgin County to see what kind of investment in time they're willing to make for us, so we get a better picture of what it is. Taking a look at other people's economic development plans in and around us, so Southwold, Dutton Dunwich, and all these areas, so that when we are meeting, we are coming to them with maybe a lot of the background work for them.
Councillor Statham.
Thank you through the chair. Just to follow up on that, I think I agree 100%. I think we're early enough in the season that we can, we sort of look at what the budget holds for economic development. And if we're looking for direction, my suggestion, my thought is that we need to identify some key strategic priorities that the Economic Development Committee is going to be looking at, and establish those in advance, make sure that we're targeting those strategic priorities and focusing on them, because it is too broad of a topic.
So can we as council come up with our 3 strategic priorities we would like the Economic Development Committee to be focused on them?
Mine before, if I can speak, before even coming into this, was to bring tourism in. I feel like we're recycling our own money to each other at all the times.
Mhm.
And we're trying to support all the businesses all the time. And we're all, as West Elgin and Dutton Dunwich, and we're all kind of interchanging each other. So to bring people in, I do hear what Councillor Denning is saying. People want to stay. They want to have a time here, and sometimes they can because there's not enough places to stay, not enough options. So bringing that whole tourism thing and working with the county would be great in my mind. Seeing what that looks like, even if it's down the road.
Can we look at downtown revitalization as another strategic priority? I think that's critical.
100%.
That's 2.
Now that will maybe even boost more when we ever get our West Lorne revitalized. I'm not sure where that is date wise. I had it down, but it's not on this notepad.
I think if I can add to Councillor Denning's point about assisting landowners and understanding what they're able to do, that to me speaks to facilitating entrepreneurship opportunities within the community. I think that would be a good start. Those are 3 solid strategic goals that we could focus on. And then I would also like to have a conversation about the Chamber of Commerce. I know that it wasn't necessarily working in 2017. We're 2024. And I think that things have changed a lot. I know in our community, the women in small business has done a phenomenal job, and they've filled a role that, I worked on the Young Entrepreneurs Initiative through the Chamber of Commerce in St. Thomas, and that was an extremely effective initiative. The women in small business have done a phenomenal job doing almost that exact same thing and supporting women in small business. And I think that, perhaps it's something that we can discuss is maybe revisiting the idea of having a local chamber of commerce. I've had discussions with Fitboro and a number of small businesses in the area. And it might be worth investigating. I'm not saying it's necessarily something that we need to be doing or that we need to be, investing in, but yeah, I think it might have benefits certainly in the community. So, thank you.
All right, thank you for that. Any other discussion around the table? Councillor Vakis?
I'm wondering if we can move into tourism opportunities, Councillor Dennings and Councillor Statham's idea of engaging secondary dwellings, as it does follow into that. And then keep the third priority with the liaise with existing businesses and facilitate the development of new enterprise through the support and provisions of opportunity for new economic growth, which speaks to the retention, the impediments, and the information that a chamber would do. So until we develop a chamber, our third kind of strategic thing is to offer support to all businesses in West Elgin.
Yeah, our planner Robert had shared quite a while ago that he'd hope to come to council at some point with the outlines of what can be put on your property, what businesses, what other secondary housing. So to put something together at some point. Anything else around the table? Okay. Go ahead.
Sorry, through the chair, one more question. I just had a question for staff. Do we have a local business directory that's maintained by the municipality?
No.
Chamber used.
That brings that back together. Chamber used to do it.
Elgin County does on their website, and if you reach out to them, it is supposed to be up to date. But I think Dan Seuss and I were talking earlier as well. I think there's also excellent opportunities with Southwold and Dutton Dunwich for some of these things that maybe cost a bit more money once the economic development committee is going, is to talk to them, right? So that we could be creating a Dutton, like an Elgin West business directory.
Yeah, it was just a thought that I had. It was a note that I made. Thank you very much.
Okay, and our economic development, Dan Seuss, after all the discussions, do you have anything you'd like to say? Yeah, please approach. I heard you saying stuff out there, so just the microphone. Obviously, we said your names several times, so you don't have to introduce yourselves.
Well, just in case anybody that is listening, I'm Dan Seuss. I'm actually the vice chair of the Economic Development Committee. So looking around the room, I was hoping more economic development committee members could be here. Obviously, we all have jobs as well. But looking around the room, very few people in this room. The three of us that are on economic development are actually multi-generational residents of West Elgin. My grandfather owned a lot of, or not grandfather, well, my grandfather did too, but my great grandfather moved here many, many years ago and owned majority of the downtown of Rodney over the years. Kind of stating that, where has all of this gone? We had a Ford dealership, a GM dealership, we had a Massey Ferguson dealership, we had a John Deere dealership. Before all that, we had a Ferguson dealership where the LCBO is now. Just seems like it turns into a ghost town. That's why I really wanted to focus on the EDC. I don't want to focus on just downtown. I'm a business owner as well. I'm not in the downtown. When you talk to people in business and you say, oh, we're going to revitalize the downtown, they get really upset when you say, oh, we're just going to focus on downtown. And of course, let's just put all the money to there. It's doing business and helping businesses. I think as a municipality, we need to help. When I started my business, it was a fight with previous CAOs and such, right down to whether a water meter was there or not. The information we have is zero. We need more information for businesses that are going to start. So on a standpoint of that, I would expect that the municipality helps in a way that if a landowner comes and wants to start a business, we need to help them. Many other communities, when I started my brewery, offered me a lot of incentives to leave this community. But because we're generational here, and not only on one side of my parents, but both parents are multi-generational, we chose to stay in the community. And a lot of businesses, Mike is as well. I mean, his family was a tobacco family. Pam's the same thing. You know, we're not going anywhere. We want to stay here, but we need to help everybody. So I like the way that you guys have stepped up today and done the ideas of what we need to do. And I hope that we can all work together to make it happen. You know, we volunteer our time, and I don't want to go to a meeting and just have a wasted time. The past few meetings have just been a waste of time, really. It just gets a circle loophole of information. There's a lot of things we can be doing, but we need to really step back. We need to get support from our businesses as well. They don't believe in us, really, to be honest with you. If I talk to businesses in the area, they don't believe in us. They think it's going to fail again. I do like the idea of an Chamber of Commerce. Within talking to St. Thomas Chamber of Commerce and going to, like Ryan talked about, the YEI, so the Young Entrepreneur Initiative, which I've now am totally 100% against it. It focuses only on St. Thomas. Most of the members on that committee, Ryan being one of the starting members, Josh at Fitboro and Rodney, and another group, Amy and Phil. They live just around the corner here. They have a small business, and they've all left that initiative. We have a time here we can start these initiatives and bring them to our community and work inside of our community. Recently as well, me and Michelle have been asked to join with Dutton Dunwich and with Southold and the County of Elgin. There is the economic development committees are looking at trying to set up an idea. We're going to have a meeting, I think, in a couple weeks. It's going to be driven by Elgin County. They're funding the thing 100%. And they're going to put all the legwork into it. So there is money to do these things. I think we really need to push to have that. If you look at other places, I'm on a committee in, it's Elgin County in Norfolk. It's called Toast the Coast. In fact, I've convinced them to put a sign up. It's going to be on the 401 at Furnival Road. They're paying for that 100%. You know, at $1,800 a year or whatever that is on the 401. So there are places out there that are doing things more than what we are doing. I know the signage for Toast the Coast was kind of a pain because the Elgin County's engineering department was kind of in shambles. But we've now gotten, those signs are going to be starting to go out. So if we could follow something similar to that, that one is basically breweries and wineries, but something similar to that in our own community to bring people here. Like, we have nothing to offer, like we were all talking, you know, somehow to make affordable short-term stays, bring people to our community. I know my business brings people from, hardly any people from West Elgin, because they don't know I'm there. People have lived in Rodney for 4 years and all of a sudden drive by and go, wow, there's a brewery here. And it's like, you know, how do you tell people that? You know, if I could make a dialogue of everything that everyone said to me, it would be, it's pretty sad actually, how little our own communities know. People from Ottawa know who I am more than people in our own community. So we need to figure out how do we bring people into our own community, keep our people and bring them here. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, not seeing, you have something, no, not seeing anything else then. It's okay to go on number 6. So we'll go on to number 6 of our agenda for Recreation Committee. 6.1 is our current terms of reference. And once again, everyone's had a chance to look at that. Any questions or comments on just the term of reference itself at this point? Committee member delegations, we've got Megan Bartlett and Cindy DeCosta. Did you want us to have a discussion and then speak, or want to speak or come back up, or? Sure, that sounds great, Megan.
So I've just prepared a little something. I just want to thank you all for having us here today. I'm pleased to attend this meeting as co-chair of the Recreation Committee. As you may know, my name's Megan Bartlett. I'm a proud Recreation Committee member for approximately 2 years and a resident of West Ogden for approximately 10 years. Over the last year, for some even longer, the Recreation Committee has been meeting monthly. We consist of 2 council members, approximately 4 enthusiastic community members, and a municipal staff member. During these meetings, our primary focus has been on Canada Day festivities. We discuss ways to improve this yearly celebration to allow our community to celebrate and connect with one another. It is an opportunity to highlight services, activities, and connections in our community. Months of brainstorming and planning go into making this a success. One of the driving reasons our current committee members join the Recreation Committee is their passion for recreation, their desire to have recreation programs in our community, and their desire to help shape and advise on recreation in the community. They also desire to promote recreation within West Ogden. To date, the current group has been involved with primarily Canada Day preparations only. We are made aware of some decisions like repainting of the shuffleboard lines, but are unaware of other key recreation decisions such as an outdated playground being replaced with pickleball courts. The table is bursting with ideas for our community to support the growth of recreation. We know that recreation supports the health and wellness of our residents. It creates connections. It provides a financial stream. It generates community growth, and it can reduce barriers to entry. We're a small group of volunteers trying to make an impact within our community, but end up spinning in circles due to the lack of purpose. Many ideas are shared. Unfortunately, they go nowhere. So we're looking to council to determine 3 key items. We'd like to determine what the purpose is of the Recreation Committee. Why does the Recreation Committee exist? And what level of importance do you place on recreation within our committee? Could our recreation programs flourish with the addition of a dedicated recreation person who could create, promote, and source recreation and generate funds? Imagine having our arenas and halls booked much of the year with events and activities. Imagine families staying in our community to participate in ball hockey, basketball, or dance, rather than traveling to other communities. Imagine our community continuing to grow with the addition of more residents and their excitement of a community filled with recreational programs. Imagine not having to save each year to make repairs on a crumbling but cherished community pool, but rather have a dedicated person who is writing grants to help support improvements in existing recreational facilities. So as the Recreation Committee, we are just looking to determine what our purpose is, where we need to go, and whether or not council determines recreation as a priority with our community.
That's great. Thank you, Megan. I really appreciate it. And your open honesty is great too. Anybody have any questions about that before we go on to Cindy? No? Okay, we'll discuss it after. Cindy, you have something to say?
I was hoping to speak after.
Sure, that sounds great.
Thank you.
So I echo a lot of what Megan's saying. We do spin our wheels a lot. There's no real direction. That's why I wanted to bring this to a special meeting. We do have great ideas. We are a determined bunch, and then I feel a lot of times we hit roadblocks. So for example, years ago, I believe Cindy was on the committee then too, we really saw that we wanted to do ball hockey. And then we weren't able to do that because of, I believe, the humidity in the arena. And then we also really brought up a great idea to do or look into roller skating in our rec center. And then that was debunked. And it seems everywhere we go, we have a roadblock. Every single where we go. From funding to ideas to can't do it because another rec is in there and will wreck their lines, being the shuffleboarders, and different things. Nothing would ever work. So we have an abundance, as Megan said, and many ideas, and none of them ever get implemented, it seems, and it's super frustrating. And then the idea was maybe we should talk about connecting with the arena board, because that's rec as well, obviously. and do that, but that's gonna be really long meetings and a lot go on in my mind, so that might not work either. But just if I can bring it to council, if you have any other brainstorming ideas for the to get over the blocks of ideas of when we have ideas that we hit these roadblocks. I know there's funding that we can tap into that we haven't been, but once again, that staff time again. So yeah, anything you have to add to that, myself or Megan has said, then that would be great. Want to have any ideas or anything that they could, Councillor Denning?
Thank you very much through the chair. Thanks for the presentation, Megan. That was excellent. Thank you. And one of the things I've thought about in the past as well that our deputy mayor just pointed out is the idea of our rec committee and arena committee working together. Of course, one of the issues is that our arena board is a shared organization between Dutton and West Elgin. But that being said, when we talk about recreation, we talk about recreation becoming more successful the more people we have to participate. Perhaps there's a case for having a discussion with Dutton Dunwich about having our recreational needs, our assignments, our committees work together to see if by bringing together two different communities, there'd be an opportunity to expand recreational programs on both sides of the Dunborough line. There might be an opportunity there to with more people to justify more programming.
Mhm. So Councillor Denny, we had a meeting about 2 months ago. Councillor Novakis, myself, it was held at the West Elgin Community Health Center. So a bunch of stakeholders, the Lions from Dutton Dunwich, Cindy DaCosta. I'm trying to think all those, the social worker from the health center. I remember her last name and not her first name right now. Charlotte from Dutton Dunwich and Barry from the health center. I think I'm including everybody. No, Christina Pringle and Shelley Smith. So trying to bring all those stakeholders in to talk about how we have joint rec, how we have maybe a rec calendar. So one in September and one in maybe January. So if you have 2 children, you're not going, one's at hockey and one can be at dance, but you got to pick because there's so much going on different nights. And that would include utilizing the buildings within Dutton Dunwich and West Elgin. And we just brainstormed and looked at that exact thing of bringing the two together. I thought it was a very productive meeting. We had a lot of great ideas. We brought some back to the rec committee a little bit, but we haven't even, Canada was in the way to get down to the nitty gritty of that. And I believe that what we came out with is they already have something somewhat like what you're talking about and like what we met for. I've forgotten the name of it because I only have the acronym. What is it called, Councillor Novakis? Cindy DaCosta?
The name of the group name?
Yeah, Elgin West.
Elgin Youth Committee.
I think,
Advisory Committee,
we
yeah.
believe it's Elgin West Child and Youth Organizational Committee or something along those lines. There's an acronym and we're trying to figure it out in our brains, but too many acronyms. So they're doing something somewhat like that. So they're meeting again and have invited those that never met in the past to come in. So maybe that will be helpful to bring exactly what you brought. Yeah, the idea ahead. Because as you said, it's a joint shared agreement with Dutton Dunwich. And to have everybody on board for all rec would just kind of make sense. Give your hand up, Councillor Backus. Oh, okay. You have the floor.
I think to Megan's question, it's what is the purpose of this committee? And I think that we do have a mandate in here. It's that we maybe ultimately aren't following it to the best, right? So develop planning regarding municipal run events and recreation programming. It's reviewing submission from community association, implementing partnerships. I think what's happened is that we just aren't given the information with which to do any of those things. So I think that is probably a reframing, and I'm assuming it's from COVID time, of what we need from staff to effectively be the rec committee and run these things, right? And I think Megda has talked about it with the budget coming. It'd be really great if the rec committee could see a proposed budget for the pool before it comes out so that we as a committee could be discussing that right? Ultimately, for me, it comes down to, and this is not a job performance question, but I had asked in when we were looking at our organizational review and Kelly had come in who our rec person was, because there was a position that was for rec. And in that I was told Adam is our rec person. And I appreciate the work that Jennifer does. But sometimes I don't know if Jennifer has all of the information. And so when we are talking about recreation decisions and planning that we want this committee to be supporting, I don't know if we are getting the right staff person to talk about it. And it is not that I don't feel that every staff member is doing lots of work. And I understand that Adam already sits on a committee with the arena board. But there have been some situations in the past that to have had the rec committee aware or a part of the decision may have helped communicate better to the community why we're making those decisions. And I think it's just Jennifer is not in a position to have those top level information or ideas, and she is constantly having to take anything back to staff. And then what happens is by the time it gets taken back and it comes back, we don't really, it's either done or we have moved on to something else. So the committee itself is then ineffective. And if Adam is the rec person, as per our drawing, then Adam should probably be sitting with us in the rec committee if we are talking about the recreation center, the pool, and recreation programming. Is my feeling.
Thank you for that. Megan, you can approach, yeah. Oh, you have to come up to the podium.
I think to Michelle's point, I think right now we just feel like glorified volunteers. And like I mentioned, we only just really communicate about Canada Day, and that's great. It does take a lot of planning. It takes a lot of hands, but it's the same people at the table. It's the same sort of vibe that we try to organize every year. So just really trying to understand, like, do you just need volunteers to carry out programs? Are you interested in having rec in this community, and what would that look like? Should rec be organized by volunteers, or to Michelle's point, should Adam be sitting at this table? I mean, in a perfect world, if there was a money tree, it would be amazing if we could have a rec person who is writing those grants and bringing people into our community to attend a gun show and then go to like do a brewery tour afterwards and maybe stay overnight. Like, I think there's some connection with economic development as well, but in a perfect world, it would be amazing to have a recreation person that writes grants and finds money for our crumbling pool that everyone loves, or creates programs that support our diverse population. Again, I think money is always going to be a barrier, but if there's some creative ways that we can connect with other communities and maybe share a rec person, or if there's different avenues that we can travel down where we can find a way to, it's not Michelle organizing a basketball night or that sort of thing. Like, I drive to Dutton every week to go to a run club. I could be doing that in my own community, right? Instead of, well, while I'm here, I'm going to stop at the grocery store and pick up a little something. And yeah, I want to keep my dollars. I want to keep myself in this community. I don't want to be traveling to other communities. And I feel like other people feel the same way as well.
100%. I hear it all the time. Thank you for that. Councillor Denning, I believe your hand was first.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through the chair. And again, thanks again, Megan. Lots of great ideas. So building on what Megan has just said and what we were talking about before, again, I'm a big believer in partnerships and working with other organizations to get the best out of both organizations and the best out of our human resources. And I'm wondering, there was a time where we had a recreational associate working for West Elgin, And I'm not sure why that role is no longer with us, but it was there at one point. The idea of having somebody to orchestrate programming at the same time as seeking out grants is a wonderful idea. And I'm not sure again what Dunwich has in that world, but perhaps there is an opportunity for some sort of shared resource. And I will yield my time to Councillor Navakis.
Through the chair,
Councillor
'cause I
Vaca.
was thinking, so having talked to the Dutton Dunwich rep people, and I do think talking to council that there is a bigger appetite now than last time this was proposed to look at perhaps investigating a joint role. And I mean, that was part of also why that youth committee meeting came up. It's that we as two municipalities cannot be affording to buy basketball nets for both, or like, that's a bad one because they're hard to move. So let me take that back. Let's say volleyballs because they're easy. There isn't money. The budget keeps shrinking. So it's how can we be creative, right? How can we offer programming that maybe one person does that's in both communities so that they're running and saving us money? So I do believe if the rest of council is wanting to look at that, it's a great initiative for us as a rec committee to start thinking about what that looks like and for when our budget comes up. But I think I'd have to go to our CAO. Like, I don't know how we go about even starting that conversation again. If we want more resources, we can't probably get more resources, either of us. How do we start as a council to reopen that conversation about getting a shared rec person who can help the rec committee and programming and promotion?
I also look at it as like taxes too. People be like, oh, why are, it would up our taxes to do something with rec, but it is super important that we have something. It's something I get stopped in the grocery store and emails about and phone calls about constantly. We need this, we need that. I go another community play ball. I go another community. I go to Bothwell to do the roller skating. I go here and there. Like, we need to keep our own people here doing our own things, just to echo it again. And they don't want to be traveling, especially in the wintertime, to do these things. They want to do them in their own backyard. Yep. Magda?
Through the chair, I did attend last recreation meeting a couple weeks ago, and the reason why I attended that meeting was because I've heard the concerns, and I felt that, yes, well, I agree with Megan. Yes, you're being used for Canada Day activities because that's what you have been doing for the last 2 years. So the reason why I attended the meeting was to perhaps provide a little bit of guidance. And number one, now that Canada Day activities are behind us, well, let me remind you, because not that long time ago, we had Snake Lady coming to the municipality on Canada Day, presenting her animals for 10 years. And nobody even asked the public what they thought of it, whether they wanted her back. So my very first suggestion at that meeting was, even though I didn't attend Canada Day events, but there was a lot of new activities provided to the public. So in order to know what the public really wants, why don't we reach out to them and ask them for their feedback, like, what they would like to see besides of what we provided them with. So right away, we came up with a survey. The survey went out. It's still available on our website. I don't know how many responses we have so far. So then, we have activities at the pool. Again, nobody ever asked the public what they would like to see at the pool. We need that feedback from the public. So right now is the perfect time where we can, start compiling that information from the public on the services that we currently provide, so we can perhaps improve them, or discontinue them. Then another suggestion that I provided at the meeting was, what do we want? What does the Recreation Committee want to accomplish in the upcoming years? So what are your goals and objectives? Whether you're on Recreation Committee or Economic Development Committee, our common goal is to improve the quality of life for our community, basically. So what can we do to better support our community? So I think, even though survey doesn't show any kind of progress, but it helps us plan for the next year. So I am I'll be more than happy to attend the meetings and kind of guide you and provide you with help. But again, like, we have to start thinking of what we want in our community for future year, and then, develop a budget against it. I mean, we can start fresh as early as January 1st and have a plan in place and work towards it. But without that, we'll be running around circles and not getting anything done. And that's what we have been doing in the past. So.
Thank you, Councilor Navakis.
Through the chair, I was wondering how we as a council would start the process of investigating, reaching out to our Dutton partners. Is that something that would have to go through our next council meeting for us to ask you to do that?
Well, if the Recreation Committee goal is to look into shared service with Dutton Dunwich, we can discuss this at the next council meeting, and perhaps reach out to Dutton Dunwich.
Go ahead.
Just going through this again, it does seem that a big part of what the Recreation Committee is supposed to be doing is providing a space for the community to be giving feedback. And I think we have surveys. I am wondering if we want to, in our next rec meeting, talk about having a symposium or an open house, a town hall, to really start wrapping heads around those sorts of things. And I do think also, for the purpose, our purpose is to support recreation programming and staff. So after budget, I think it'd also be really great to have a town hall symposium, or before we've approved the budget, to go over the rates and pool fees, so that anybody who wants to be coming and hearing things can be given a piece of the conversation.
Okay. Anything else from anyone around the table? All right, our delegation member, Cindy DeCosta, do you want to speak? Are you good?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
It was just in case.
I see you rapidly writing things down, so thank you though for registering as a delegation to speak though. I appreciate it. So our next council meeting, I don't have it in front of me right now, is 15, yeah, okay. So I'll contact Jennifer to see exactly what we can implement some of those ideas and put it on there. Anything else on this subject, or not seeing anything? So we'll move along to number 7, our confirming, thanks to everybody that's come today, our confirming bylaw.
That bylaw 2024-57 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the special meeting of council held on August 1st, 2024 be read a first, second, third, and final time.
Thank you. And a mover, please. Councillor Statham, a seconder. Councillor Navakis, all in favor? That is so moved. Move on to, that's been carried, adjournment.
That the council of the municipality of West Elgin hereby adjourn the special meeting of council at 5:46 p.m. to meet again at 4:00 p.m. on Thursday, August 15th, 2024, regular meeting or at the call of the chair.
Mover, please. Councillor Denning, seconder. Councillor Statham, all in favor? That is so moved. Thank you so much.